The sound of Olivia Parker's heels echoed through the marble corridors of Maxwell Industries as she hurried toward the CEO's office. Her heart pounded against her ribs, not from the brisk walk, but from the unexpected summons that had come minutes ago. "He wants to see you immediately," her supervisor had said, eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and concern. At 28, Olivia was the youngest financial analyst at the firm, brilliant but struggling under the weight of family responsibilities. Her father's medical bills from his battle with cancer had depleted their savings, and her younger brother's college tuition loomed ahead like an impossible mountain. She paused before the imposing double doors, straightened her simple navy blazer, the most expensive item in her professional wardrobe, and knocked. "Enter." The voice was deep, commanding, and unmistakably belonging to Ethan Maxwell, 30-5-year-old billionaire and notorious bachelor, whose face graced business magazines monthly. The office was a testament to wealth and power floor to ceiling. Windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that probably cost more than her annual salary, and abstract art that she recognized as original pieces from artists whose exhibitions she could only dream of attending. Ethan Maxwell stood with his back to her, staring out at the city he seemed to own. When he turned, Olivia was struck by how the photographs failed to capture the intensity of his gaze. "Miss Parker, thank you for coming." "You didn't exactly give me a choice, Mr. Maxwell," she replied, immediately regretting her candor. To her surprise, a smile flickered across his face. "Direct. I appreciate that." He gestured to a chair. "Please sit." She complied, crossing her ankles and placing her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "I'll be equally direct," Maxwell said, taking his seat behind the imposing desk. "I'm facing a situation that requires ... unconventional measures." Olivia waited, confusion replacing her nervousness. "My grandfather's will has a stipulation that I must be married by my 36th birthday to maintain control of the company. That's in 3 months." Her confusion deepened. "I don't understand what this has to do with me." "I'm proposing a business arrangement, Miss Parker." His eyes locked with hers. "Marriage, 1 year, after which we divorce quietly, and you receive $7 million. The room seemed to tilt. "Excuse me? Your financial situation is dire. Your father's medical expenses, your brother's education, the mortgage on your parents' home that you've been paying." He slid a folder toward her. $7 million would solve all of that, wouldn't it? Ice filled her veins. "You investigated me?" "I research all potential business partners." "This is absurd," she whispered, standing shakily. "Is it?" He stood too, towering over her. 1 year of your life for complete financial freedom. A practical exchange. Marriage isn't a business transaction. In many ways, it is. But I'm not heartless, Miss Parker. This arrangement includes separate living quarters in my penthouse, complete privacy, and my solemn promise not to interfere with your career or personal life beyond necessary public appearances. Olivia felt cornered, manipulated, and yet $7 million. Her father could get the experimental treatment he needed. Her brother wouldn't have to abandon his dreams. "Why me?" she finally asked. Maxwell's expression was unreadable. "You're intelligent, composed, and from my observation, capable of discretion. You also have compelling personal reasons to accept. I need time to think, of course. You have until tomorrow. My driver will take you home tonight." As she left his office, Olivia felt the weight of an impossible choice settling on her shoulders. Freedom from financial ruin at the cost of selling herself into a year-long contract with a man whose cold calculation terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. What choice did she really have? The small courthouse ceremony was nothing like the wedding Olivia had dreamed of as a little girl. No white dress with a flowing train, No father walking her down the aisle, no tearful mother adjusting her veil. Instead, she wore a designer cream suit that Ethan's stylist had selected, and the only witnesses were his lawyer and her best friend Sophia, who looked equal parts concerned and amazed. "You may kiss the bride," the judge announced, the words hanging awkwardly in the air. Ethan's eyes met hers, questioning. This wasn't in their contract. They had agreed to a handshake at most, but appearances had to be maintained, especially with the courthouse staff watching. He leaned down, his lips barely brushing hers, in what should have been a perfunctory gesture. The unexpected jolt of electricity that passed between them startled them both. Olivia stepped back quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Maxwell," the judge said with practiced enthusiasm. Mrs. Maxwell. The name felt foreign, like a coat that belonged to someone else. The rest of the day passed in a blur signing papers that would transfer the first installment of her payment, moving her meager belongings into the guest suite of Ethan's penthouse, calling her parents with the fabricated whirlwind romance story they had rehearsed. Married? "Olivia, how could you not tell us?" Her mother's voice trembled with hurt. "It happened so fast, Mom. I'm sorry." The lie tasted bitter. That evening, she stood on the terrace of what was now technically her home, staring out at the glittering city lights. The penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of one of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings, with a private pool, a library that would make any bibliophile weep, and art that belonged in museums. "Your keycard will access all areas except my private study," Ethan said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "The staff has been informed that we prefer privacy, so they'll be discreet." She accepted the glass without looking at him. This is really happening. Second thoughts? Would it matter if I had them? "The contracts are signed, but I'm not a jailer, Olivia." His use of her first name sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "If at any point this becomes intolerable, we can renegotiate." She finally turned to face him. In the soft evening light, his features seemed less harsh, almost vulnerable. "Your father's new treatment begins next week," he said quietly. "I took the liberty of arranging for the best oncologist in the country." Surprise rendered her momentarily speechless. "That wasn't part of our agreement. Consider it a wedding present." There was something in his eyes she couldn't decipher. "You sacrificed a great deal today." "I'm not completely heartless." The following weeks established their routine. Breakfast taken separately. Both leaving for work, he insisted she maintain her position at the company, despite whispers about favoritism and occasional public appearances as the new power couple. Ethan was meticulously considerate about maintaining her space, never entering her suite without invitation, which he never received. Their conversations were cordial but brief, discussing schedules and upcoming events with the efficiency of business partners. Yet sometimes she would catch him watching her with an expression that didn't fit their arrangement, curious, almost wondering, as if he was seeing something unexpected. The facade they presented to the world was flawless. At charity galas and business dinners, they played the part of the besotted couple perfectly. His hand would rest lightly on the small of her back. She would laugh at his quiet comments, and they would dance with practiced coordination. What disturbed Olivia most wasn't the pretense, but how easily it came to her, how natural it felt to be by his side, how, despite everything, she was beginning to look forward to those moments of performed intimacy. It was all an illusion, she reminded herself sternly. A business arrangement with an expiration date. Nothing more. 3 months into their arrangement, the cracks began to show. Not in their public performance that remained flawless, but in the careful boundaries they had established. It started with small things. A book left on her knitstand with a note. "You mentioned wanting to read this." Breakfast appearing at times when she actually could eat it. Her favorite flowers mysteriously refreshed in the living area each week. Ethan was becoming less of an enigma and more of a person complex, driven, but not the cold businessman she had initially believed him to be. She learned he worked with several children's charities anonymously, that he visited his mother in a private care facility every Sunday without fail, that beneath his composed exterior was a mind that never stopped questioning, analyzing, seeking. The most revealing moment came unexpectedly one night when she found him in the library, tie loosened, hair slightly disheveled, staring at an old photograph. "My grandfather," he said without looking up, sensing her presence. "The man whose ridiculous stipulation brought us together." She hesitated, then sat beside him on the leather sofa. "You must have loved him very much to go to these lengths." "It's complicated." His voice was rough with something she hadn't heard before. "He raised me after my father died, taught me everything about business, about life. But he also believed I was becoming too focused on work, neglecting what he called the only wealth that matters, family." Olivia guessed. Ethan nodded, finally meeting her eyes. "The irony isn't lost on me, forcing me into a marriage to learn about authentic connection." The vulnerability in his expression made her heart twist unexpectedly. Their fragile peace shattered a week later when she attended her brother's college award ceremony. Ethan had been invited, but had sent his regrets due to an important business meeting. Or so she thought. The event was in full swing when she spotted him entering the auditorium, drawing stares and whispers. He slipped into the seat beside her, just as her brother was called to the stage. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, torn between confusion and an emotion she refused to name. "I rescheduled the meeting," he said simply. "This matters more." Later, as they drove home in tense silence, she finally gave voice to her fears. "This isn't part of our deal, Ethan. These gestures, showing up at family events, getting to know me, ... It's blurring lines that need to stay clear." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "And if I want to blur those lines, don't." The word came out sharper than intended. "In 9 months, this ends. $7 million, and we go our separate ways." That was the agreement. Agreements can change. Not this one. She turned to stare out the window, hiding the tears threatening to fall. "I won't be another acquisition, another challenge conquered. My freedom at the end of this year is non-negotiable." The temperature in the car seemed to drop several degrees. "I see." His voice was back to being the cool, detached tone of their first meeting. "Rest assured, Mrs. Maxwell, I always honor my contracts to the letter." The formality stung more than it should have. That night, unable to sleep, Olivia wandered to the terrace and found Ethan's normally immaculate desk in disarray, a half-empty glass of whiskey beside scattered papers. Among them was a handwritten letter that caught her eye, his grandfather's. Final words to him. "Find someone who sees past the empire to the man beneath. Someone who challenges you, who makes you question your carefully ordered world. The company is your legacy, but without love, Ethan, it's an empty inheritance." She backed away, feeling like an intruder in more ways than one. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, a business transaction with clear terms. Now everything was tangled in emotions neither of them had accounted for. The next morning, Ethan announced he would be traveling to Tokyo for the next 2 weeks. Business, he said, not meeting her eyes. They both knew it was retreat. The distance between them grew in the months that followed. Ethan buried himself in work, often returning to the penthouse long after Olivia had retired for the night. There, public appearances became less frequent, carefully scheduled to maintain appearances while minimizing actual contact. Olivia told herself this was better a return to the boundaries they should have maintained from the beginning. Yet the penthouse felt emptier somehow. The silence heavier. Her father's health had stabilized with the new treatment. Her brother was thriving at college, and her family's financial worries were were a thing of the past. She should have been content, counting the days until her freedom. Instead, she found herself lingering in the spaces Ethan occupied, picking up books he had left behind, wondering about the man who had become a stranger again. 6 months into their marriage, disaster struck. Olivia received a frantic call from Ethan's assistant while at work. "There's been an accident. Mr. Maxwell's helicopter went down during a storm near the Adirondacks. Search and rescue teams are looking, but the conditions are severe." The world tilted beneath her feet. She grabbed her desk for support, earning concerned looks from colleagues. "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question. "We don't know yet. His security team lost contact about 2 hours ago." The next 24 hours were a blur of fear and uncertainty. Olivia coordinated with emergency services from the company's crisis room, authorized whatever resources were needed, and fielded calls from board members and business partners. When exhaustion finally forced her to take a break, she found herself in Ethan's private study, the one room she had never entered. It was surprisingly warm, with bookshelves lining the walls and a desk that faced the windows rather than the door. Photos she had never seen decorated one wall. Ethan as a child with his grandfather, at his college graduation, breaking ground on his first major development. On his desk sat a small wrapped package with her name on it. With trembling fingers, she opened it to find a first edition of her favorite novel and a note for our 6-month anniversary. Not a traditional milestone, but perhaps worth marking nonetheless. He had remembered an offhand comment she'd made months ago about the book. That had shaped her childhood. The realization broke something inside her. "Please," she whispered to the empty room, "please be alive." As if in answer to her plea, her phone rang. They had found the helicopter, damaged but largely intact. Ethan and the pilot were being airlifted to the nearest hospital. Both alive. Relief made her knees buckle. Hours later, she stood in the doorway of a private hospital room, staring at the man she had married for money and now feared losing for reasons she couldn't articulate. Ethan lay sleeping, his face pale against the white sheets, a bandage across his forehead and his arm in a cast. "He'll be fine," the doctor assured her. Remarkably lucky, actually. Some bruised ribs, a broken arm, mild concussion. Nothing time. Won't heal. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and took the chair beside his bed. Throughout the night, she kept vigil, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, occasionally reaching out to touch his hand, as if to reassure herself he was really there. Near dawn, his eyes fluttered open, immediately finding hers. "Olivia?" His voice was rough, confused. "I'm here." She squeezed his hand gently. "You stayed." The surprise in his voice broke her heart a little. "Of course I stayed." He studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. Why? The question hung between them, demanding an honesty she wasn't prepared to give. "We're still married," she said finally, the words feeling inadequate even as she spoke them. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps. The contract, right? "No, that's not." She stopped, frustrated by her inability to express. The tumult of emotions coursing through her. A nurse entered before she could continue, checking Ethan's vitals and adjusting his medication. "Your wife hasn't left your side since you were brought in," the nurse said cheerfully. "You're a lucky man." When they were alone again, Ethan's gaze returned to her, questioning. "I thought I lost you," Olivia admitted quietly. And it mattered. More than it should have. It was the closest either of them had come to acknowledging the shifting ground beneath their arrangement. As their contractual year drew to a close, tension filled the penthouse. The divorce papers waited in Ethan's study, prepared by his lawyers as promised. In 2 weeks, Olivia would walk away with the full $7 million and her freedom. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a precipice. Ethan had recovered fully from his accident, but something had changed between them. Their careful distance had been replaced by a new awareness, lingering glances across the dinner table, conversations that stretched into the night, small touches that seemed to burn through fabric. Neither mentioned the impending end of their arrangement, as if by mutual agreement they had decided to pretend it wasn't looming over them. The final gala they would attend as a couple was a charity event for children's medical research, 'cause close to Olivia's heart since her father's illness. She wore a midnight blue gown that Ethan had once mentioned matched her eyes, her hair swept up to reveal the diamond earrings he had given her for Christmas, just for appearances, he had said, though they both knew better by then. They moved through the evening with practiced ease, the perfect power couple everyone believed them to be. Ethan's hand rarely left the small of her back, and she found herself leaning into his touch, memorizing the feeling. "Dance with me," he said as the orchestra began a waltz. On the dance floor, he held her closer than propriety demanded, his eyes never leaving hers. "In 2 weeks," he began, his voice low enough that only she could hear, "you'll have fulfilled your part of our bargain." Yes, the word felt like glass in her throat. "And if I asked you to stay?" The question hung between them, fragile and momentous. Ethan ... not for money, not for appearances. His hold tightened slightly. For all the reasons people usually stay together. Before she could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A woman was arguing with the security staff, her voice rising above the music. "I need to speak with Olivia Parker." With a shock, Olivia recognized her mother's voice. Ethan immediately guided her through the crowd toward the disturbance. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Tell me it isn't true," her mother demanded, distress evident on her face. "Tell me you didn't marry this man for money." The ballroom seemed to go silent, though the music continued to play. Olivia felt Ethan tense beside her. "Mrs. Parker, perhaps we should discuss this privately," he suggested, already steering them toward a side room. Once the door closed behind them, her mother brandished a tabloid. "This reporter called me, asking about your arrangement, said he had proof you married for $7 million. I told him it was absurd, that my daughter would never." Olivia couldn't speak, shame and guilt overwhelming her. "It's true, isn't it?" Her mother's voice broke. "All those stories about falling in love, the whirlwind romance lies."